otherwise, let's dive into this thing. And for those of you that are new to us, what we like to do for this long form content like this is start with a recap of the episode before we dive into our actual meaty discussion of it. And what we like to do is cut that recap out of our podcast and host it separately for anybody that, just needs a convenient way to catch up or just to refresh. So if you find yourself on our recap video and you're interested to hear our full discussion on this episode, it will be linked down in the description box below. Alrighty. So
Little disclaimer though.
yeah.
Will and I are jumping in pretty fresh on this campaign. Don't know, we haven't seen Crown of Candy. So if we miss a reference or, just be gentle on us, because there was a lot of info and we were like, I was texting Will like, okay, so who is this person? And Will was like, I think it's this person, but anyway, so have some grace for us. And if nothing else, give us some a heads up in the comments on connections maybe we're missing with that.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I was gonna give a very similar disclaimer that probably gonna mispronounce some things, may even misspeak on some things. So yeah, feel free to correct us down below. But and I know Blake just said this, but to reiterate, we have not seen Crown of Candy, and we're gonna do our best not to spoil that. I know some things will be just inevitably spoiled, but since it is a prequel, we're thinking maybe we can get away with some of it. So for those of you in the comments, discussing the episode, please try to like mark any spoilers that may be Crown of Candy knowledge, if you will. Thank you. Okay, so recap of episode 1 of the Ravening War, Seeds of Conflict. So this story takes place in the year 1188, roughly 20 years before the events of the Crown of Candy. And we pick up with a scene inside of a carriage headed to Comida, from Vegetania to the south. And inside this carriage, we have 3 of our player characters. First, we have Queen Amongo Epice Dupesh, a mango.
That was really good, by the way.
Trying my best.
Yeah.
A mango person played by Anjali Bhimani.
Trying to figure out like the best, like most sensitive way to like describe a mango person. That was great. So
Thanks.
Continue though.
So she is the recently widowed queen of Vegetania and is currently dealing with the political ramifications and fallout of her husband having died before they produced an heir. So there's all this drama about who the next successor will be. Clearly, she wants to continue to reign, but there's a lot of, drama around this. And they are headed to Kamida for this celebration known as the Egamir Festival. And what's going to coincide with this is also like a memorial for her late king, the late king.
Right.
Accompanying her, we have Bishop Rathaniel Charlock, a radish, I think.
That's
played by Brennan Lee Mulligan, who is an advisor to the queen and practitioner of the Bulbian faith. And it seems as if he's tended to the spiritual needs of the royal family for many years. Also accompanying them is Karna Solara, who is a chili pepper played by Abria Iyengar, and she is seemingly a friend of the queen's, but also her apparent spy master, for lack of a better word. And there's some small talk, and at one point the carriage comes to a stop, and one of the drivers, who is a carrot, comes and tells them, hey, buckle up because the storm is getting worse and the ride might get bumpy. And I bring this up because after this quick little interaction, the bishop remarks to Karna, hey, you need to like be careful. He saw what you look like in this form. So, you need to like either change forms, and we don't have the full context of what he means here. Maybe we'll talk more about this in our discussion, but he tells her like, hey, you need to be careful because he saw what you looked like. Karna then telepathically communicates with the queen and says, hey, did you tell him stuff? How does he know this stuff? And the queen's like, well, I didn't tell him anything. So a little bit of intrigue there. Next, we switch scenes over to another carriage, and this one is also headed to Kamina, but from the north. And inside, we have Thane D'Alessandro Katzen of the Meatlands, played by Lou Wilson, along with his mother, who is an NPC, Chiefess Cleva Katzen. They are also headed to the Egamir Festival, and they are traveling with a number of escorts, one of which is Colin Provolone,
Colin
The
Provolone,
Colin Provolone.
MVP.
A Dairy Islander played by Zach Oyama. Delisandro and Colin didn't know each other before this. They seemingly just hired Colin for this mission. And Colin is keen to make a good impression, and they have a kind of awkward, if not endearing, buddy buddy relationship brewing. Also, in this scene, we kind of get a feel for what type of people the Meatlands people are, as the chiefess, who is, equivalent to a queen of that land, I would presume, is very uncomfortable in the formal attire and is not looking forward to this formal setting. She's a much more rugged person and a great warrior. We then fast travel basically the remaining 2 days of travel to Kamida, and the next scene is these carriages pulling into the city. And we're back with the Queen Amongo. And they're coming in. There's a massive building, a massive pyramid known as the Food Pyramid being constructed. And we're told it is the home to the new council site of Fructera, which Kamida is in Fructera, which is this other land or city. Like I said, there's lots of carriages of all these nations arriving for the festival. And Lady Amongo, they arrive, they get out, and the first thing Karna does, calling back to the warning the bishop gave her earlier, is she subtly attacks this yam. And yams are actually like equivalent of horses in this world. The carrot guard I mentioned earlier was riding on a yam. So she subtly kind of attacks this yam so that it kind of falls over on top of the carrot guard that saw her and injures him pretty badly. Basically to the point of this carrot guard is going to have to leave their service for the rest of this festival.
Season or
Yeah,
yeah.
because he's injured, and the bishop actually runs over and makes sure that make sure he's taken care of, like he's off duty. So she kind of successfully gets that liability wiped away because the carrot's gone. And
In a
there's
very,
yeah,
very
there's
dark way.
yeah, it's very dark. And there's also this really weird moment that happens in this scene when the bishop sees the injured carrot like bleeding. He kind of
Yeah.
has this like freak out moment internally, being like blood, viscera, and kind of quickly regains himself. But a very strange moment that is not touched on anymore in this scene. With that taken care of, Karna says like, I'm not going to the festival. I'm here for my own work. And she kind of takes off to do some spy master duties, and as
Right.
actually masquerades as her former spy master mentor, Jacques Coudeté, I think.
Hmm. Yeah.
And she's going to go plant information and see what information she can pick up on from the usual spots. Okay, we then cut to Deli and his mother arriving, and Delisandro, Deli for short, asks Colin to introduce them. This is not Colin's strong suit, but he awkwardly does so, to which he is told, yeah, hey, introductions will happen in the festival. And he's like, oh, okay. So we then kind of cut
So
to
good.
people entering the festival. And as Lady Amongo enters, it is announced that she is a widow, and they use her maiden name. This is
Yeah.
a unexpected embarrassment for her, and the bishop kind of walks up beside her and tries to like bolster her, but another man quickly walks up and introduces himself as Count Jacques Tomate, and he's a pleaser because he's like at your service. Um, we then get another announcement that Queen Pamela Rocks and Princess Citrina Rocks of Candia have arrived. And their arrival is followed by Senator Fakasha and Senator Enzo Carbano and Senator Ariana Gemelli of the Saresian Empire. And Enzo Carbano is Deli's grandfather. So he goes over, they greet each other, both very happy to see one another. But then Ariana, who is Enzo's daughter, takes Deli aside for a private conversation. Next, we have the introductions of the Archbishop Camille Cauliflower and Bishop Elizabeth Brassica, which garners a lot of attention. And it's now we cut back to Karna, who is out doing her spy master stuff, planting information. And she's kind of putting out the information that she got from the bishop, which is that the Vegetanians don't like any of the options for succession to the throne. And Abria rolls like a natural 20 on planting this information. In doing this, she kind of gets fed back two names during the gossip of the potential next king that people want. The first is Count Belvedere Cabbage, who is seemingly a man of the system. He has been around like the royal courts and senate for a number of years. And the other name is Count Jacques Tomate, who is more a man of the people, like a people's champion type of candidate. So we cut back to Amongo and Tomate, who are having a conversation right now about her possibly coming to live back here in Fructera if she's sent away from the crown, as she was originally from here. He seems agreeable to this and would help set her up if this was the case. However, when the conversation turns to who the next monarch might be or should be, Lady Amongo makes it clear that she's like, "What do you mean? They're like, I'm the one in
Right.
charge now."
Yeah. Why wouldn't it be me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it gets a little awkward, and the bishop privately takes her aside and is like, "Hey, you are the ruling monarch. You are the queen," but he warns her that it might not be wise to say this aloud and garner enemies. And they then kind of, as part of this conversation, talk about maybe her finding a new husband, as it would be the best way to bolster her claim to the throne, and that
Right.
her vows were till death do you part. So those are over.
Right.
Um, Around this time, we have the Queen and Princess of Candia come over, and the Princess Citrina is a devout of the Bulbian faith and admires Bishop Rafanuel for this reason. So they meet and greet, and she says, I'm trying to spread the Bulbian faith all throughout Candia. However, the queen is not so amicable with the bishop, as she's very cold and says that, there's many interpretations of the bull, but there are many sects, implying that she doesn't really agree with what the bishop's saying or really care for him. And as such, Brennan casts detect thoughts to see like what she's thinking about him. But her mind is formidable, and really all he can get is that she's very cold and has a deep mistrust of him. Now we cut to Colin, who is with the chiefess because Deli went away with Ariana, so they've just kind of secluded by themselves and are having a conversation. And the chiefess likes Colin because he's not like stuck up like everyone else here. He's kind of just an everyman. But she wants to know what his intentions are with her son. Like she basically asks him, like, look me in the eye and tell me that like you're not gonna stab him in the back, which he does. He looks her in the eye and says he won't. I mean,
Right.
um, and she says, my son, his greatest weakness, but also his greatest strength is his like large heart. So like I need you to watch out for me, and I will pay you to do this. Um, and he says, yeah, like I mean to be true to your son. This is the best gig I've had in a while. Like absolutely, I'll look out for him. And she hands him a bunch of gold. Um, we cut back to Delhi now, who is having this private conversation with the Senator Ariana of the Saresian Empire. And they're talking about, and this is something we'll dissect in our discussion because there's a lot to unpack here, but they're talking about his time in the Saresian lands, as Delhi spent part of his youth living in that area and not the meat lands. And this conversation is great. There's a huge, huge flirtatious vibe going on throughout this whole scene. And she talks about how she wants to come and see the meat lands, but is kind of probing for information because she's asking, like, what's the
Mm.
political state of the area? Like, how are the different clans getting along? And Delhi says, his mother has made great strides to end the conflict, the very same conflict that caused him to leave and come live with them in the Saresian lands in the first place. The very same conflict that ended the life of his mother, his other mother.
Right.
Um, but he says the Meatlands are making strides. However, it's hard to say if we'll ever be fully unified. And she says, well, I'm very interested to come and see them, should it ever be unified and be safe for me to do so. And she says she has faith in him to be the one to do that. And again, the sexual tension is palpable. So after this scene, the festival's kind of winding down, and we cut back to Karna, who is kind of winding down with her spy master duties, making her way back. And that's where I'll hand it off to you, my friend.
Yeah, great job, man. There was a lot of first time introductions, and I think you nailed it.
Yeah, thanks for being with me.
Yeah, no, great job. So for this sort of last hour of the episode, essentially what happens is everyone kind of returns to their own room before they intend to go to dinner. And Matt has this great series of moments with each person individually, where as each person goes back to their individual room, there is a box there. There's a package, a gift. The first person who receives this is our dear Colin Provolone, who is very suspicious and is, I think, even like hits it with his sword, like what is this? And I, well, you might have to help me here, but essentially all of these messages are going to be very similar with some key differences with each person. And basically every letter opens up with something along the lines of, we know. And not necessarily like we know what you did, but like we know about something. And essentially these letters are basically blackmailing each individual of the party, saying, hey, we know, but also like you're destined for great purpose. And you know, there's a path that you're on that we'd like to help you with, and essentially ending with, come to the base of the food pyramid, and you'll find out more. Specific to a couple of the characters, Lady or Queen Amango, she gets a series of like a ledger that talks. It apparently there's some kind of shady business with money being owed or money having being spent. Our chili pepper friend, I can't think of her name.
Karna.
Karna, yeah, Karna Solara. Abria's character, she gets, and was this, I know she gets the ring of her former spy master, but I think Matt said his finger.
Yeah, the ring still around the severed finger of a carrot.
Yeah. So the severed finger of her former spy master with the ring on it, and she takes the ring. Thane Deli is going to get a negligee or something, like an intimate piece of lingerie, that we're not clear who it belongs to. And then
I think the implication is it's from the senator he was talking to. Like they know of that relationship between them.
Well, I was going to say later he confesses to Abria's character that he is in a relationship with someone that he's not supposed to be. So I thought it was referencing that relationship. Like we know about this secret relationship, which maybe it's that person. I'm not sure. But what did Colin and the bishop get though? I don't
Colin
remember.
got let me just look at my notes. I think it was the flag of
Right.
I don't remember the exact details, but what it meant was they knew that there was this coup in the Dairy Islands where Colin is from. Yeah. I want to say it was Lucas Fontina, but I'm not looking at it right now. Apparently, Lucas Fontina. Fontina was the name. I don't know the first name. Fontina led a coup in the Dairy Islands, and it's like a marred patch of history for that land. And seemingly, Colin may have had something to do with that. Is the presumption.
Yeah, and then Brennan's character,
Brennan the bishop, had some herbs that were from like a specific place on like the southern coast or something, which in small doses is like a nice tea, but in large doses can cause problems, which we're not like given specifics, but either lethal or some other malady from it.
Well, so essentially, each character individually decides, I'm going to go check this out, and they each individually head to the food pyramid. Notably, Karna and the bishop cast invisibility on themselves. And we have this moment where essentially at the base of the food pyramid, it's just silly saying this, the party meets together, and notably Colin, Queen Amango, and Thane, they all Thane De La Rosa, I can't think of his full name.
D'Alessandro Katzen.
D'Alessandro, yeah, thank you. They meet and they're pretty much like, what's going on? Like, am I getting punked? Like, is Ashton coming out? Like, what's happening here? And it's around this time that also Karna is going to. There is a man who's wearing a rusted mask, who's sort of like beckoning them to enter this pathway under the base of the pyramid. And she's basically going to do detect thoughts and is like, "Who are you? What are you doing?" And the person basically looks in her direction but ignores her and begins stepping down under the base of the pyramid. Before they go down, the bishop is going to sort of see the confusion and is basically going to drop his invisibility and be like, "Lady, I'm and go. Like, where have you been? Well, I heard one of the local places saw you walking unattended. Like, you can't be out here so late. Like, what's happening?" And immediately, like the entire table like turns on Brennan with insight checks,
Yeah.
and
Such
there's
a
a
great
great
moment.
moment. Going back to Will's comment, I'm like something weird happening. It's very clear there's a lot to Brennan's character that is very shady, and in fact, in this moment, Matt calls for an insight check versus a deception check, or preference of that, or persuasion. But it's very clearly a deception check because they're like, what are you doing here?" And because Brennan's character is acting like, oh, I just was out of good faith, was coming to help Lady Go. And we get this amazing moment where they both
It was a
Lady
Bria.
Amango, yeah, Lady Amango though rolls really well, and then I think actually did she roll a natural 22?
I think so. I think Abria
I think
and
her
Anjali, and then
yeah,
Brennan did too.
yeah. So there's two natural 20s that Brennan has to roll against. He has advantage. He rolls, hits a natural 20 as well, and then he gets silvery barbed by Abria's character, so he has to roll again, and he still beats her. He rolls a 17, but he has a plus 10 to deception and gets a 27 and beats her roll. Which by this was just kind of a cool moment of just like DMing like the rule set, I guess. And so there's just this nice moment of like people being like, I feel like I know I don't want to believe you, but I feel like I guess I have to now because you beat me on the roll. So but Brennan's character is like, yeah, I just was here to help. Like, I didn't get a box. It's pretty much like what he's saying. The group, all this to say, they go down underneath the food pyramid. They open up into this large cavernous room where these figures step out on like these, not railways, like balconies surrounding them.
Yeah.
And they speak, they're wearing masks, they're wearing these outfits, disguising their identities. And they basically identify themselves as the Fellowship
Of Destiny's Architects,
Thank you.
the
And they basically,
FDA.
oh my gosh, I didn't pick up on that. So the Fellowship of Destiny's Architects, and they basically explain that through the through the last, foreseeable past, as kingdoms rose and fell, they were in the shadows, pulling strings, making things happen, and they basically say, "You have an opportunity to work for us. When the time is right, we'll call on you. And if you don't, then your secrets that we mentioned in the box you received, this will wash you away. This will bring great shame to you. It'll basically end, whatever foreseeable future you have." And there's a lot of the party's trying to figure out, like, do they know anyone in this group? And the most they can understand is that these individuals are from all six kingdoms. So it's a diverse group. And then meanwhile, Thane Deli and Colin are not quite in sync on this. Colin's kind of like, this is a little crazy. And Deli is like, this is kind of cool. Like, they're talking about if we do what they say, they're going to help us have power. And there's going to be a lot of good things that come from this. All this to say, they realize they really don't have much of a choice. And they're like, okay, well, just call us when you're ready for the most part. The party makes their way out of the pyramid. They know they need to head to their dinner, but before they do so, there's a couple other conversations that happen. Deli and the bishop have a great conversation where Lou's basically like, bro, I mean, I know you wouldn't have been here if you didn't get a box. And the bishop's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I think it's like a Bria's character, like Karna's like, how come they didn't ask? Like, what's this guy doing here? Like, you just wandered in here. It's just another awesome moment of like the table turning on Brennan. And but he beats them on the roll again. And they're
Yeah.
just like, okay, fine. I guess I believe you. But there is a great conversation still though between Karna and Deli on basically like, hey, let's get it all out in the open. Like, what do they know that I should know? And that's when Lou basically explains, I'm in a relationship that I'm not supposed to be, or that people don't know about, I guess. What about you? And Karna's like, I mean, I pretty much already shared what is true about me. I'm the new spy master, and there's really no drama there. Though I think there is some drama there. She's not letting on. All this to say, the party makes their way to the dinner. At the dinner, they have their meal, and it's around this time that Jack Tomate basically stands up and gives this toast and basically says, it's my intention to claim the throne. And he explains like in this very kind of like semi-drunk, noble-esque way of like, I am Fructarian, Vegetania needs a leader. The queen is Fructarian, so it just makes sense, and only I know how to best like bring these kingdoms together. And there's immediately like strife at the table. There are nobles present who are like, we disagree. You have no claim to the throne. Tomate also talks about like how it's written in like the bulb religion, like legally he's owed the throne. Not really totally sure there on the details, but all this to say, Matt basically gives an outro to the episode of what the next 2 years are like. Skipping ahead 2 years, explaining how Tomate decides to take the kingdom by force, begins taking like border cities and infringing on Vegetania, and how essentially the Meatlands get involved, the Dairy Islands, Candaria, and everyone gets involved in this massive conflict that would come to be known as the Ravening War. And that is where our episode ends as 2 years go by. So that was episode 1 of the Ravening War. Yeah.
Yeah, and y'all, don't forget, if you want to hear our full discussion, it'll be linked down in the description box below. Alrighty, man. Let's dive right into it.